The first thing I remember is the sound, not the pain, that crack of a gun going off way too close, bouncing off a quiet street that had felt like my fresh start 30 seconds earlier. 1 minute I was in my vintage Mustang with Marvin Gaye low on the radio and my favorite red silk shirt on the next. That same shirt was opening up dark and wet, and I was staring down thinking I really just got shot for reaching for my wallet. The cop was maybe 10 feet away, arm locked out, Glock still smoking, yelling "gun," like he'd just survived an ambush. And in that weird frozen instant before everything went fuzzy, I had the most lawyer thought in the world: he's already building his story, and I might not live long enough to tell mine. My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm 38, a corporate litigator, a black man who did everything the right way first in my family to finish college, then law school, years of late nights and bad coffee, and swallowing a lot of disrespect to make partner 2 weeks before that bullet. I'd finally closed on my dream house in a neighborhood called Northwood Hills. Big oak trees, quiet streets, security gate, the kind of place where people talk about school districts and property values, not gunshots. And, yeah, I let myself believe that zip code and job title might function like armor, you know what I mean? That afternoon I was just taking the long way home to enjoy it. Windows down, sun on the hood of my '68 Mustang, leather warm, Marvin humming, and for the first time in a long time my brain was quiet. No briefs, no emails, just this soft thought: maybe you really did it. Maybe you actually belong here. And right on cue, the red and blue lights hit my rear view, and that peace just shattered. If you've never felt your stomach drop at the sight of a cruiser behind you, I hope you never do. But if you grew up like me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. My brain did a quick checklist: speed under the limit, blinker on seatbelt, everything fine. But my hands still went a little numb on the wheel because the rules change the second those lights go on. I eased over, put the car in park, set my hands flat on top of the wheel like my mom drilled into me when I was 16, fingers spread so wide they hurt, and I told myself, just get home, just get home. He got out of his car like he was stepping into a bar fight, tall, buzz-cut, jaw clenched, walking up fast. "Hands on the wheel, don't move," he barked before he even reached my window. "No, sir." No explanation, just command and suspicion, and I said, "Yes, officer," because I like breathing. "Do you know why I stopped you?" he asked, and I said, "No, officer, I don't." And he said, "You were driving erratically," which was a lie, and we both knew it, but the shoulder of the road is not where you cross-examine anybody. So I swallowed it and slid into the script. I give my own clients narrate everything, move slow, leave no room for imagination. My license and registration are in my wallet in the glove box. I said, I'm going to move my right hand there now. And I moved like I was underwater. Opened the glove box, picked up my wallet, held it up flat in my palm. I have my wallet. I'm going to open it and take my ID out. My voice steady, even though my pulse was hammering. The sun hit the metal edge of a credit card, and there was this tiny flash, the kind you don't even notice most days. But I watched his eyes lock onto it. His hand was already sitting on his gun, and his whole body tightened. "Gun," he shouted, and I didn't even get "it's my wallet" out before the gun went off. The sound swallowed everything the impact felt like. Someone swung a bat made of fire through my stomach. My back slammed into the seat. My lungs forgot how to work. The red silk turned almost black in front of my eyes. The wallet slid out of my fingers and landed on the passenger seat, looking painfully ordinary. And as my vision tunneled, the last thing I saw was his face. Officer Michael Miller. No shock, no horror, just this hard little look that said he was already the hero in his own story. When I came back, it was to harsh lights and machines beeping and a tube in my throat, pain sitting heavy like a brick inside my abdomen. I tried to talk, and it came out as this broken hiss, but it was enough to yank my best friend and law partner Sarah Jenkins out of a twisted nap in the chair by my bed. Blazer, wrinkled hair a mess. "Marcus, you idiot, I told you to take a vacation, not a bullet," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. And if you've ever had somebody make a bad joke at the worst moment just so you don't break apart, you know what that feels like. She told me I'd been out for 3 days, that the bullet had torn through my colon and nicked a kidney, that they weren't sure I'd make it, that my car was sitting in an impound lot as a crime scene, and that the department had already held a press conference about how their veteran officer had been forced to fire on a non-compliant suspect. I couldn't say everything I wanted to say, so I motioned for a pen hand shaking and wrote, "The news." And she hesitated, then reached for the remote and turned on the little TV in the corner. My firm headshot was on the screen, suit and tie next to a caption that said, "Armed suspect shot by police." A captain from the department stood at a podium reading a statement about me failing to follow repeated commands, about a sudden movement consistent with drawing a weapon, about a split-second life or death decision. Then a union lawyer came on and called Miller a hero, hinted I had a history of aggressive behavior, and I lay there full of stitches and tubes and listened to strangers rewrite my life in real time, and something inside me went from scared to solid because I realized they weren't just trying to kill my body, they were trying to kill my name. I scratched out 3 more words on that pad: phone investigator evidence. And Sarah just nodded, said she'd already hired a private investigator, a former detective who quit when he got tired of watching complaints disappear. She'd already filed papers forcing the city to preserve all video and surprise. They were already saying the body cam had malfunctioned and the dash cam file was corrupted beyond recovery. Yeah, that happened. While I learned to sit up and then shuffle down the hallway with an IV pole squeaking beside me, my people went to work. Sarah handling the legal side, our investigator pulling old files and talking to anyone who'd talk, and a reporter named Elena Ramirez digging through records and stories. The department hoped no one remembered. She came to see me one afternoon. No camera crew, just a legal pad and tired eyes, and she said, "I read the report. It doesn't add up. It never does in cases like this." She'd already checked the street, the sun angle, the lack of traffic cameras. She'd already noticed that Miller's partner from that day hadn't given a single public statement. "Here's the deal," she said. "I don't work for you. I work for the truth. If I go after this, I'm going to print what I find, even if some of it is messy, but it also means the department doesn't get to own your story. That's the trade." And lying there in a hospital gown, sore and furious, I decided I'd rather live with a messy truth than their polished lie. So I shook her hand and said, "Let's do it." What they found was not one bad day for a good cop. It was a pattern. Miller loved working the rich neighborhoods, pulling over Black and Latino men for things they couldn't prove later: weaving or rolling stop, dim taillight. The charges that stuck were usually resisting arrest. There were complaints that went nowhere, civil suits that ended quietly after people ran out of money, and one name that kept me up at night: a teenager who tripped down a concrete stairwell during a chase years earlier and left the hospital with permanent brain damage. An older neighbor finally admitted she'd seen Miller shove him, and then got a visit reminding her about her own son's probation. So she changed her story, and in her words you could hear 10 years of guilt. And of course, once we started pulling on that thread, the system pulled back. A plain black car started parking near Sarah's place for hours. Tires got slashed. My private number started getting blocked calls, sometimes just breathing, sometimes someone whispering, "You should have stayed down," or "nice house." Elena got smeared online as anti-police. Her building and her kids' school mentioned by name, and one night she called and said, "Maybe we should wait." And I understood I did, but I was also standing in my own living room watching a similar sedan creep past, feeling my scar throb under my shirt, thinking about all the people whose names we'd learned and all the ones we hadn't. And I told her, if we back off, he wins, and the next person he pulls over doesn't have any of this, they just end up as a line in his report. And after a long silence, she said, "Then we don't back off." The twist. The moment everything turned came from the last person the department wanted anyone hearing from Miller's partner, a younger officer named Ben Evans, while Miller was on paid leave and TV sets talking about his trauma. Evans was parked behind a desk. No patrol, no cameras, just paperwork and a conscience that apparently wouldn't shut up. He started hearing sermons about truth in church. He got a quiet conversation in a grocery store parking lot from our investigator about what it means to carry someone else's blood on your hands. And then one night, Elena's generic inbox at the paper got an email from a burner account. 3 words, no signature, dash cam file, 7B4-1. That was the internal tag for the dash cam from our stop, the same file the department swore was hopelessly corrupted. And thanks to one tech in the evidence unit willing to risk his job, we got it on a cheap little USB drive that looked like it should be holding college essays instead of proof of an attempted murder. We took it to Sarah's office, my stomach in knots, because if that file really was trash, we were back to my word against his. She plugged it into her laptop, hit play, and for a second it was just static. My heart dropped. Then the picture snapped into focus, and there was my Mustang easing to the curb. Blinker on. There was Miller's cruiser behind me. The audio was clear. You hear my voice, calm, narrating my movements. You see empty hands on the wheel. You hear him call me a clown in his neighborhood before he even steps out. You watch me move slow and deliberate. You see that little flash off the card. You hear him shout, "Gun." and then you watch him shoot a man who is visibly holding a wallet, not a weapon, and you watch that wallet fall onto the passenger seat while I bleed onto the leather, and in 30 seconds the entire official story rots in front of your eyes. From that point on, they didn't just have a PR problem, they had a problem with reality. We filed a federal civil rights lawsuit naming not just Miller but his supervisors in the city. Elena published a long article laying out his pattern of abuse and the cover-ups with that dash cam video embedded at the top. And the internet did what it does when it sees something it knows is wrong. It spread it everywhere. Protests formed outside City Hall and police headquarters. Justice for Marcus signs popped up overnight. The mayor started talking about accountability. And the Department of Justice announced a civil rights investigation into my case and the whole department. By the time Miller went to trial, I could walk without a cane. But the limp and the scar are permanent souvenirs. He walked in wearing a suit instead of a uniform, flanked by lawyers, and a jury sat there watching that dash cam on a big screen, listening to paramedics describe how close I came to dying, listening to other people tell stories that sounded way too familiar, listening to Miller talk about fear and split-second decisions and the flash of metal, and then watching my attorney Sarah hold up my leather wallet in an evidence bag and ask him in front of everyone which part of it he thought was a gun. The jury didn't stay out long. Guilty on aggravated assault, guilty on perjury. The judge gave him 18 years and called his record a betrayal of public trust. The city settled my civil case for more than I ever imagined seeing. The chief resigned. The DOJ forced reforms through a consent decree. Some of Miller's old cases got reopened. And for a minute it felt like the ground had shifted just a little bit in the right direction. A few months later, I drove my Mustang back down that same street in Northwood Hills. The seat repaired so clean you'd never know what happened. The oak trees still throwing dappled shade, kids still riding bikes, neighbors still walking dogs and pretending nothing ugly had ever gone down there. And I parked in the exact spot he pulled me over and just sat with my hands on the wheel for a minute, feeling the scar pull under my shirt, thinking about how close I came to being just another headline that blames the victim and how many people never get the camera, the lawyer, the reporter, the anonymous email, any of it. I can't tell you this fixed everything, it didn't, but it proved something to me that the story doesn't always have to stop where they want it to. So now I want to ask you honestly, when you pictured that dash cam in your head, who did you believe first, the officer at the podium or the man bleeding in the car? Do you think any of this would have happened without that video and the people who risked their jobs to bring it out? And have you ever seen a moment in your own life where the truth finally cut through all the noise like that? Tell me in the comments. Argue with me if you need to share what you've seen, and if you want more real conversations about justice and who gets believed in this country, hit subscribe, send this to someone who still thinks a wallet can look like a gun, and let's keep this conversation alive.